Welcome again to the Skillwork Forum. As a reminder, this podcast exists to help leaders and companies who are looking for solutions, not only to how to get past and through this COVID-19 pandemic, but really the broader skilled labor shortage in America. So I'm Tim. I'm joined by my partner from Skillwork, Brett. And today we're going to talk a little bit about a topic we heard recently that I think is very compelling, and it's evergreen, meaning whether it's in this season of COVID or a year from now or 5 years from now, it's very, very relevant, I think, to individually and as company leaders. And Brett, you and I were listening to some leadership recently, and something that we participated in the past called LeaderCast virtually. So it was a little different in this COVID-19 era, but one of the speakers and one of the talks that really resonated with us was by Dr. Henry Cloud, who many people recognize as a preeminent leader, and he's got some great concepts and ways to make things very practical. But he was talking about this concept of a necessary ending, and by that he was really pushing on this concept that for something new, something better to emerge, oftentimes something else has to end or something else has to change. So the idea of being proactive about correcting something that may be bad or broken in our life or in our business, and taking the opportunity to address that, make change to be able to press forward into a better tomorrow. As a matter of fact, he said, the today that we're holding on to is often the biggest enemy of your tomorrow. And I know you and I, Brett, talked about that and that concept of being strong enough, if you will, and willing to make some of those necessary changes.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, another way of saying that I've heard over the years is, one of your biggest challenges to future success is your past success. And, when you really kind of stop and think about it, it's really what Dr. Cloud is referring to here is that once as an organization, once you find some success, the tendency is just to want to hold on to it and ride it as long as you can and hope that it doesn't end. Now, we both know there are a lot of examples that all of us can think of. I saw a payphone the other day, and I laughed about it. One, in the midst of COVID, I thought who would use it, but two, the fact that there was a payphone there was shocking to me. And so, there's a great example of that. They held on to. A lot of people use the example of I believe it was Polaroid. That they resisted the digital age, and they actually were a leader in it, but they didn't want to upset their film business. And maybe it was Kodak, I don't know, but don't hold me responsible on that one. But the point being, they couldn't make the adjustment. So.
Yeah, I think it was what IBM famously said. The idea of people having a computer, every individual having a computer, is preposterous. Who would do such a thing? Yeah. And of course, that proved to not be a great forecast for the future. So, it's if you look at this conceptually, and Brett, you and I, we are certainly center a lot of our life around our faith, and for us, we hold on to the scripture, and there's so much truth in that can be applied to day-to-day life. And this idea, probably why it resonated with you and I so in such a powerful way, is the idea of pruning, which is kind of what Dr. Cloud, he used that term, pruning, and it's very relevant to this personally and professionally, this idea of cutting things back in order to produce a better crop. So, we were created for growth, for change, and for new things, but At the same time, we also have this resistance to change. And we don't like to change, but we're made for it. So this dichotomy exists in us. So the idea of pruning and the fact that, it has to be something that actually proactively you have to do to cut something away in order to produce a better crop. And maybe we can talk about that concept with respect to disrupting what you're doing now in a positive way by maybe cutting something back from what you currently have.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I think the thing, that's probably worth noting, in here, a lot of it, as leaders of businesses, and as you're thinking about this idea, there's a couple things. One, I think it depends on the season of your business. Obviously, if you are, if you're a newer business and you only have, a couple customers, for example, being, be pruning on the sales side would probably be challenging. But as your business grows and you begin to look at that, it becomes different. I think part of it too, as a leader, you really have to know where you're going. You have to have established that that vision for the business and know where you're going. Otherwise, pruning could sound like you're just never satisfied. You're constantly, just changing stuff just for the sake of changing it, which is
Right.
not the case at all here. It's about constantly making the tough decisions to get to a better place, which should align with your vision.
Yeah, I think that is a absolutely key and fundamental point, that you have to know where you're going. What is your end state? And then everything then should align to that, including what you keep, what you try to make better, and what you decide that it's not going to get you where you want to go. So this idea of pruning, I think, also resonates with me because, my wife, and I think yours, Brett, is, we really like the outdoors and our gardens and our flowers and things. Like my wife is very, very good at what she does. And sometimes I see her pruning, cutting things back, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're cutting away what looks like really good new growth, and there's blooms on it. And she says, you got to cut this stuff away to make it, it healthier or produce better blooms. And to your point, Brad, I think about our neighbor next door, Bob. He likes to keep everything super, super tidy. So he cuts everything back super tight. It looks neat, but he never has any blossoms. It drives my wife crazy because he over prunes, he over prunes. So, we thought we would cover three things that Dr. Cloud mentions. And by the way, he's got this book called The Necessary Ending. I want to give him full credit for that. So we're borrowing some of these concepts from him. But he talks about, how do you prune? And what are three things that you should prune, or places where you should prune as it relates to maybe your business? And we could probably look at these on a personal level too. Maybe we should look at those three things, Brett. And the first one, maybe you could speak into, or what about things that are good and healthy, but not the best, that maybe you need to do some pruning there?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I mean, I think it's right along that idea of, if you have a clear vision as to where you want your organization to go, these decisions on good but not best, start to become, I don't know if they're easier, but they become more clear to us. Prior to Skillwork, I owned a food manufacturing company, and we made bacon, which, right next to heavenly. And so, but that's what we did. And, but I remember early on, in the early days, any customer was a good customer. We had invested a lot of money, and we were trying to fill the capacity, of which we had plenty of. And so everyone, but as as the company grew and it became more clear, that we were kind of out of that stage, I had to make decisions about some customers that really either the margin wasn't there or just the types of products that we were making them really didn't align. It wasn't efficient for us. And we had to make those decisions. And when we did, then that allowed us to open up that capacity and open up that time and resources to really be able to really grow the business much faster, which we did. So,
Good. Yeah. So that first one thing then is good things, good and healthy, but not the best. And the second one that Dr. Cloud talks about, which is probably even more challenging in a way, is pruning. The concept of pruning. You want to cut away things that are sick and not going to get better. If you have blight on a plant or a tree, oftentimes you cut it off because it's not going to get better, and in fact could infect the rest of the plant. Same thing goes in an organization, whether it be your people, your processes, your customers. Sometimes you got to make some difficult decisions because maybe it's that individual in your organization just simply doesn't align with your core values, or they're going to be resistant to where you want to go with your strategy. They're simply not going to be on board with where you want to go and aligning with that. So in that case, you may have to recognize that the best thing to do is to cut that out. And I know, Brett, here at our company, even though we're relatively new as a startup, we have some relationships with some organizations that are just not in alignment with what we do and how we do things. And there are times when we say, you know what, I think the saying is fire that customer, which is kind of a strange thought, but I think everybody out there understands what that looks like. That sometimes you have to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's, those are the tough things, but they're, they're part of this pruning process, whether it be, internal, Dave Ramsey, but many people know Dave Ramsey, he has a saying that it's unkind to be unclear. And so whether that be in relation to maybe individuals that work for you, you love them, but it's not a good fit. It's not a good fit for you or them, whatever the case, or a customer, like you said, where we want to help everybody, but it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the most healthy thing for the organization. And so I think those are the things, like you said, if you don't stay true to that, where you're trying to get, you can just suddenly kind of wake up one day and your business is all over the place and your culture's all messed up because you haven't pruned it when you needed to be pruning it. So
yeah, so that's a tough one. So we talked about pruning good things, but not the best things. We talked about things that are maybe sick and no sign of getting better. And then the third, probably most of us think about, you prune dead wood. You prune things that are dead. And I think you mentioned this up front, Brett, that, man, it's hard sometimes when you've been writing something for a while, even though it's not producing, it's not really where it needs to be. You recognize that this is something that's gone beyond the, that's not good or that's not well. This is actually, it's counterproductive or dead. And something that's supposed to be where you want it to be, but it's time to clear the decks. And I think I was listening to Dr. Cloud, and he brought up the concept of a General Motors car brand many of us, know about, and maybe some younger people haven't heard of it, but Pontiac, that brand Pontiac. I used to have a Pontiac, they were the sporty GM cars. And he said that for 40 years, Pontiac, under the GM family of brands, lost money consecutively for 40 years until they finally went bankrupt, and forced it to close. So that's crazy, but oftentimes we hang on to things that are just simply dead and need to be cut off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everybody has to assess, their own business or team or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I mean, sometimes even the obvious things, we unfortunately, as you indicated at the beginning of this, Tim, you talked about how we're designed to grow and to not be stagnant, but at the same time, we are also um, prone to not want change. And so with that, um, you can suddenly find yourself in a situation like Pontiac, for example, where they just kind of kept us, pushing the issue down the road, because obviously there was, a lot of people, employed by Pontiac and all those things. So, but it wasn't healthy for the overall organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the idea of a plant or a tree or a grapevine, that if you let it go past the second thing that's unhealthy, eventually it infects the whole thing.
Yep.
And it could be not just a brand, it could be your whole business. And, bring it back to a personal level, we see all these things as being applicable to our own lives too. So oftentimes we're challenged in our faith, and this God always is constantly calling us up to a better version, to be pruned in our own personal life. And there are some things that we have to decide, this activity, this thing I'm pursuing, whatever it is that I've been convicted on, that, I need to take a hard look at and maybe set aside. And perhaps this season that we're in, COVID-19, has been an opportunity for us to think about some of those things. So we could relate all three of these things, not only to our business, but to our personal life as well. Because there's something that maybe you need to take a hard look at on a personal level. I know that's how this particular article hit me.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, like you said, we can, a lot of people make the comment, one of the easiest thing you do as a business leader, or as a leader in general, whether, we lead ourselves as well, the easiest thing to do is to say yes. The hardest thing to do is to say no. And oftentimes it's those no's that allow us to really um, pour our full focus into the real purposes, that we're called to, whether it be we can become very distracted in our business. We can become distracted in life and in our spiritual journey. Tim, as you know, there's plenty of things that we can do, but that doesn't mean that we need to be doing all of it, and miss the thing that we're really called to do. So.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize everything. So, necessary endings. That's what Henry Cloud calls this. It's the idea of pruning. It's the idea of maybe thinking, taking stock, and reflecting on whether this is a great opportunity to either cut some things back, maybe even some good things. Take a look at this. There are some unhealthy things that you can try to address and make better. We didn't mention it, but sometimes you can, get a plant healthy again without pruning it too, by giving it the appropriate nutrition and attention, and all that goes into it as well. And then there are things that are dead, long since dead, that we need to just make the hard choice to do what's necessary there. So great topic today, and hopefully this gave you some things to think about, both on a personal and professional level. We want to thank you for joining us today on the Skillwork Forum. For more information on this or any of other topics that we've talked about in previous podcasts, please feel free to reach out to us at skillwork.com. We'd love to be able to help you, particularly your business or your organization, try to overcome some of the skilled labor shortage in America. Until next time, thanks for listening.